Tonight on the Late Debate, will London be shortchanged by the budget? Money's tight, so will the Mayor get what he wants from a Chancellor facing tough choices? Also tonight, why is it so hard to keep prisoners in jail? And will anything change after Wandsworth?
I give an unequivocal apology to all who have faced worry or worse as a result of releases in error.
Plus, does making London a greener city really require a 12,000-mile round trip to Rio? Hello and welcome to the Late Debate. We've heard a lot about what could be in the budget, but how London might benefit is anyone's guess. Sadiq Khan needs the Chancellor's help to bankroll big projects like the Docklands Light Railway extension. A tourist tax would also bring in much-needed cash. Plus, there are other costly projects, including Hammersmith Bridge, which hasn't seen a single car since 2019.
I want to see money for Hammersmith Bridge in the budget on November the 26th. I think fixing this bridge, getting buses and emergency vehicles back over it will make a huge difference to the lives of people living on both sides of the river in this part of London, and that could have a huge boost to the economy and help to deliver the growth that she says she's looking for.
Well, joining me to discuss that are my guests this week. From Labour, London's Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy, Mette Coburn. For the Conservatives, the MP for Old Bexley and Sidcup, Louis French. And from the Liberal Democrats, the MP for Wimbledon, Paul Kohler. Welcome, all of you. Mette, what does a good budget look like for London?
Well, look, I think firstly, it's important to recognise that London has a huge role to play in uplifting the UK's economy. We contribute a net £43.6 billion to the UK economy. And when you invest in London, you uplift the whole economy. So the Mayor's been asking for three things in the run-up to the budget, what you want to see. One is the extension to the DLR to Thamesmead, because we know this has a huge impact on being able to unlock 30,000 new homes, which also helps support the government's mission on affordable homes, unlocking 10,000 new jobs. But also we want the fiscal devolution that we need around a tourist levy. And what this will do, Simon, essentially, is we've got, world-class transport services, police services, and, just like in any other major city that you have in Europe, whether it's Rome, Paris, what we want to have is a tourist levy to be able to uphold those services. We reckon we could raise an additional £200 million a year to make sure our Londoners and our visitors are able to benefit from that. And finally, we need more investment in our police. What we have seen from this government is more investment in the police in 1 year than the whole period of the previous government. But actually, we have some, national protests, national events, and what we need is the adequate support for policing.
Louis, does the idea of the Mayor having the power to levy a tourist tax on hotels worry you?
Absolutely. I think if you look at hospitality businesses and tourism across the country, struggling at the moment, struggling after the increase in national insurance rates last budget. You look at the job losses, particularly in hospitality, which often more often than not impacts younger people. I think they'll be absolutely petrified by this idea that there's another tax that's coming on top of them, and that will be a fear that is shared by many Londoners that find themselves really struggling with the cost of living and finding themselves in a Chancellor that's in this constant doom loop. We have to cut spending and try and take the pressure off our businesses and residents.
Paul, you've had an involvement in the hospitality industry in the past. Does it worry you that a national insurance changes or a business rates hike or a tourist tax will hit?
It really worries me. This is the worst time to add another tax to hospitality. I've owned a bar for 20 years. I've seen the financial crisis. I've seen COVID. I've seen Brexit. It's worse now for hospitality than any other time. That's why we're advocating a 5% cut in VAT for hospitality. The idea of putting another tax on hard struggling hospitality businesses would be a disaster at the moment.
Just to be very clear, we're talking about tourists who are paying for a tourist levy. You have this in many other cities, like Rome, like Paris, and actually what we have seen is it makes us as a city much more attractive, because if we're able to invest properly into our transport infrastructure, into our policing, because we're able to generate more money, what that can do is help London be the best destination to
Now is not the time for that. Hospitality in London is in such a crisis. It's absolutely. It's not the time to do it. Maybe in the future, but not now.
And the idea that someone else pays for it, I think it's just not credible. I think if you look at the impact it would have on direct charges and the direct ability for those businesses to be credible, impacting their direct consumers coming to London. I agree that London has to be a global city. We want tourists to come here. Adding another tax is not the way to do that.
Louis, whatever taxes the Chancellor levies, she's having to fix a problem left by your government.
Laughable, it's like the boy that cried wolf, Simon, constantly talking about a black hole and then suddenly they've got an even bigger one. And the reason why they have got the bigger hole is that they've not controlled spending. They lost control of the backbenchers and they try to put their welfare reforms. They've hit businesses so hard that we've seen the unemployment rate jump to 5% and we've seen this doom loop. The only way to solve that is what Kemi Badenoch has put forward, and that is to look at our golden economic rule to cut spending and make sure there's a mixture of cutting spending and cutting taxes wherever possible.
Doom loop?
I mean, it's almost as if they haven't been in government previously for 14 years. I mean, look, we're still paying the price of the Liz Truss budget. Thousands of Londoners who are spending more money on their mortgages because of the catastrophic budget that Liz Truss put forward. What we need to do is have the right way forward to make sure that we're helping London be the best place to live.
We've heard talk about a possible mansion tax or changes to the council tax bands, which would disproportionately affect Londoners who have higher valued properties. How can that be justified?
Well, look, I mean, at the moment, it's all speculation. We don't know what's coming out of the budget yet. It's coming in 2 weeks. I don't have a role to play in formulating the budget. What we want to see from the budget is the investment we need in our transport infrastructure to deliver the affordable homes that we need in our city, to create the new jobs.
You wouldn't disagree with that, would you?
So the point is, Simon, Londoners are already fleeing. They're fleeing before the budget. If you look at the amount of foreign people, wealthy individuals that are left London.
That's not true.
That is very true. It's in the statistics. And if you look at that, that's because they've been hammered on the tax and they do not feel safe in London. The biggest failure that the Mayor's office have made is the lack of making sure that police have the right resources. And that is why they're sweeping funding cuts, with my local police station not being able to open 24/7 anymore.
There's a lot of people who want to talk down London. Sorry, Paul, I know you want to come in. There's a lot of people
Not
who want
talking
to
down London, talking down the Mayor.
But the reality is we have the highest number of American citizens now living in London since for many, many, many years. And actually, homicide is down at all-time 10-year low.
They are fleeing Trump, you would argue.
Yeah.
Well, they've come into London. They could go to anywhere else in the world, but they're coming to London because London is the best city in the world to live in.
Sorry, Paul, come in.
A mansion tax is not what we need. It would be so cruel to London because of our high housing costs. We absolutely do need to reform government finance, but just a mansion tax would not be the right way. And I'd like to hear you as a deputy mayor to say to the Chancellor, look, we do not need a mansion tax.
And it hurts people that may have a house that suddenly they built many years ago that is now worth more value, but it doesn't mean they have cash in their pocket to pay for a higher tax.
It's the old band back together from the coalition, yes.
Paul, your seat is in Merton. It's one of the targets the Lib Dems have in next year's London borough elections. How mindful will Rachel Reeves be about the borough elections in this budget?
I'm sure she's concerned about it, although my impression is that Labour have given up on Merton because they've decided to cut both our police station front counters. They boosted some front counters, but in Merton, both in Mitcham and Wimbledon, they've given up. So I assume that means you are raising the white flag when it comes to Merton.
Are you expecting to see a bit of a giveaway ahead of the borough elections?
I don't know what they're going to give away. The whole country is deeply worried about this budget coming up because we're already in a doom loop. We're already seeing jobs losses. We're already seeing unemployment rate at 5%. And we have hospitality businesses like Paul's that are screaming out for help, but the government are running in the other direction with the Mayor lobbying for a hospitality tax. This is crazy.
Mette, if this goes wrong with the budget for Rachel Reeves, is it curtains for Keir Starmer?
Well, my focus is, I'm the Deputy Mayor of London, my focus is for Londoners, to stand up for Londoners. We've been very clear from government about what we want to see, the investment we need to see in London. We've always been clear, if you invest in London, you uplift the whole country.
So you're not expected to see Prime Minister streeting anytime soon?
No.
OK. The government is under pressure to get a grip on the chaos in prisons after an embarrassing few days in Wandsworth. While two wrongly released prisoners are back inside, ministers can't escape uncomfortable questions about what went wrong. An asylum seeker convicted of sexual assault in Epping was accidentally released too, and they aren't the only ones.
We understand that there are 3 mistakenly released prisoners currently lawfully at large. Their prison records show none of these are convicted sex offenders. I have been informed, Mr. Speaker, this afternoon that HMPPS are investigating a further case of a potential release in error on the 3rd of November who may still be at large.
Louis, the prison service is on its knees. Labour says it's all down to the Conservative inheritance.
Well, let's be serious about what's happened here, Simon. We have had an illegal migrant that, rather than be deported after sexually assaulting 2 victims, that was released from prison. Then we had this manhunt to find him, David Lammy promising that he would sort out the process, and then 2 more people were released from Wandsworth prisons. Again, serious criminals that should not have been out. If you look at the spike in releases under this government, it speaks for itself. The charts speak for themselves. And the Ministry of Justice themselves said it's because of some of the reforms the government are pushing through.
There has been a spike. Louis is right, isn't there?
Well, look, I think let's be absolutely clear. You know, one mistaken release is one too many. And I want to firstly start by also thanking the Londoners who've come forward with the intelligence that led to the police tracking down 2 of those who were mistakenly released. But the reality is as well, and the Deputy Prime Minister is right, is this is a systematic failure of the system for years of underinvestment in our prison services. We've seen an increase in those who have been mistakenly released since 2021. And that's partly because of the prison spaces that aren't available. Partly it's also because we've got these very analog, paper-based forms, ways of releasing the prisoners as well. And we need to be supporting those on the front line, officers on the front line who are dealing with these releases. And then the other bit of issue we have is around how do we make sure that we're supporting officers in the prison and retention around staff. So I think it's only right that the Deputy Prime Minister has launched an investigation that's going to be looking at this as a systematic issue.
The Deputy Prime Minister, Justice Secretary David Lammy, has pointed towards paperwork being a problem. But in actual fact, the release of one of those prisoners was down to prison officers not reading an email. Paul, this time last week, David Lammy looked like he was in real trouble after that Prime Minister's questions. Do you think the moment of danger has passed for him?
It appears to, but who knows what mistake he will make next. But I have to say, we have to remember this problem did start under the Tories. Wrongful releases started doubling under the Tories. It's carried on under Labour. You inherited a mess, but trouble is, you're not doing anything to solve it. And there's a huge underfunding and huge understaffing in the prison service. And what are you doing? Labour are reducing the skilled worker visa so it doesn't apply to prison officers anymore. That means we'll have even more problems next year.
I mean, Simon, look, I just think it's important to make this point, and I think that your viewers would be expecting this of us as well. I think this isn't about party politics. I think this is a very serious issue. It affects the confidence that Londoners, in our case, will have in the prison services, and I think we need to be working together to look at this systematically. We're not here in a blame game. We're here to try to find the causes of this issue, and I think the investigation that's going to be, wide inquiry that's going to be led, I think it's the right thing to do.
What do you think the answer is?
Well, I certainly hope that David Lammy doesn't visit Belmarsh anytime soon, given its proximity to my constituency, Simon. I think there are a number of issues across the prison service. I think that is right to acknowledge that, and that is not a party political issue. But as the Ministry of Justice have said, it's directly linked, the spike is directly linked to some of the changes the government have made. So they need to go back to the drawing board to look very carefully, listen to the experts on the ground about what they need, what that capital investment is need, and we have to get away from this paper system because that is ridiculous.
Has the row over mistakenly released prisoners been given more prominence because of the row over asylum seekers?
Well, I mean, it could be. I mean, I just want to, address this point as well. My parents are asylum seekers, and I know there's been a lot of talk about asylum seekers generally in the country. And, my parents came here not because they wanted to. They came here because they come from a country which has been war-torn. And, me and my family, I'd like to think, made a positive contribution and worked day in and day out to make a positive contribution to the city and the country that we all love. And I know that there's lots of asylum seekers and immigrants from across the country who do that. Yes, of course, those who are illegally committing crime or shouldn't be here, they need to be dealt with. And we also need to have a proper asylum process in the first place so that we can make sure that we deal with it. And I think, those two arguments need to be kept separate from what we're talking about here, which is the mistaken release of prisoners.
You talked about visas, but what else do you think needs to be done? It all involves money, doesn't it?
It does involve money, and ultimately we can't tax and tax and tax. We've got to grow the economy. And I'm afraid the Tories delivered Brexit. Labour said they'd make it work. It clearly isn't. We need to re-engage with Europe, and a customs union would add £25 billion to our money. And I'm sure Labour will soon come on board on that one.
You seem to be agreeing.
I mean, look, our position in London is, I make no secret of it. I, was a passionate advocate for, I think it's the biggest betrayal of young people for the opportunities that they'll have in the future. And the mayor's been very clear that we want to see the Erasmus scheme reintroduced for the UK, for young people to be able to benefit from that. And we want to see a closer relationship with the European Union.
You're the odd one out, Louis.
I think the biggest betrayal of young people at the moment is the loss of around 180,000 jobs in the hospitality sector. I go around again with my shadow brief. We meet lots of different businesses. They cannot afford to employ young people because of the changes in national insurance. Let's start with what we control right away and let's reverse those next cuts.
Okay.
Tax
now,
increases.
Yeah. Against the tropical backdrop of Rio, London's mayor took a 12,000-mile round trip to remind us to be kind to the environment. Sadiq Khan met other world mayors to talk climate change and find ways to clean up dirty rivers. But not everyone thought it was a trip worth taking.
Again, he's out the country again. This is the 5th time this year. 12,000 miles there and back, so that he can tell us all how green we need to be.
Well, it's great to see mayors from across the globe coming together at the World Mayor City Summit, sharing best practice, giving examples of what we're doing in our respective cities. So Eduardo, the mayor here, has learnt from our low emission zone, the ultra low emission zone, the world's largest. We've managed to bring our air within lawful limits in 9 years rather than 200.
Mete, you were on that trip. How do you justify it?
Well, look, it's a global summit which brings together over 300 mayors from over 300 cities. What we are seeing is that cities are doers, not delayers. And in this summit, what we had was over, each one of those cities, we're putting up yearly offer of action, tangible actions that they're going to deliver to deal with the biggest challenge of our time, which is around how we tackle the climate crisis, which is very much linked to food poverty, all of those issues that we talk about that's so important to Londoners. And London has a leadership role. It's a global city. The mayor is the co-chair of C40 Cities. So I'm very proud to be there alongside the mayor, banging the drum for London to make sure that we're tackling the climate crisis.
Louis, if Boris Johnson had been mayor, he'd have gone, wouldn't he?
I think it sticks in the throat right now. Residents across London, particularly in outer London, that are paying ULEZ fines, or they've had to change in their car, or all the other taxes they've faced from this mayor, to see him on a jolly in Brazil when they are struggling. Metin talks about poverty. ULEZ accelerated poverty for many people in outer London. What I'd also say, whilst the mayor was out there preaching about climate change, we've seen the introduction of electric vehicles being included for the congestion charge for the first time. And we also, in areas like mine, we have major risks to the green belt because of the policies the mayor is following off the Labour government. That is a real concern about our green natural spaces.
Paul, was the mayor right to go and represent London?
Of course he was. He's the mayor of our capital city. Of course he should be on the world stage. That doesn't allow him to forget the things he should be doing at home, though, and that's the problem. He's also broken his pledge to keep a front counter in every police station. He's broken his pledge on affordable housing. So yes, he should be on the world stage, but he must do what he's meant to do at home, and he's not doing that at the
Paul,
moment.
it wasn't long ago that voters in opinion polls said that the environment and climate change was one of the most important issues for them. Do you detect that that's changed?
I don't think it's changed. No, it still is a huge issue, particularly for young people. But in a cost of living crisis, people are clearly worried about every penny, and that therefore puts pressure on people's decision making.
And I think when we talk about, the specific question about polling, I think, when you talk about issues around energy prices, that's caused because we're dependent on fossil fuels. And every time something happens around the world, it's working class Londoners who are paying more the price for it. Or, the fact the mayor spoke about clean air. We should never, ever have normalised breathing dirty air. None of us here on this panel will tolerate drinking dirty water. And there are so many kids across our capital that are now breathing cleaner air thanks to the bold leadership from Sadiq Khan.
Do you acknowledge that despite the row, despite some people thinking it unfair, Louis, that Sadiq Khan has cleaned up London's air?
I've not seen independent data to back that up. What I've seen...
It's backed by government and DEFRA.
I wouldn't trust the government either. The reality is we have seen, you talk about polling, you talk about buy-in for those. I had a career in sustainability before I was an MP. Has mood shifted on this slightly? Yes, and I think it's, as Paul said, people are feeling it in their pocket. They feel very disconnected from many of their politicians, and the mayor flying around the world preaching about this stuff is not helping with that argument whatsoever.
Mete, can I just bring back to a point that Louis raised earlier? How can you justify charging electrical vehicles, the congestion charge, in the drive towards net zero?
Well, look, firstly, I think we should recognise that actually the mayor was the one who brought the cleaner vehicle discount for electric vehicles, and partly the reason why is because what we do want to see in the city is more people walking, cycling, taking public transport, and have much more sustainable forms of transport. But we also recognise people do need to drive. People like my dad. My dad's a cab driver, for example. And part of reducing congestion must be about how we could reduce the number of cars on our roads, because we've got a lot of congestion. And if we don't do anything at the moment, what we will see is an increase of more than 2,000 cars on London's roads. And so this is the right step to take forward to make sure that we could both make sure that London is able to get around quicker, but also make sure that we're doing it in a sustainable way.
You're shaking your head, Louis.
I disagree completely. The government and the mayor have told people to buy electric vehicles. They've gone out and done that thinking they were doing the right thing, and now we're shifting the goalpost. This is like the diesel scandal over again. People have gone out, they've paid lots of money for these new vehicles, and now the mayor is shifting the goalpost. This is another tax on
It's
hard-working
not a
Londoners.
tax, because what we're talking about is an incentive being brought forward and then actually being brought forward at a different level now. So we're not talking about putting an additional money onto a car driver.
But they're still
People
paying.
feel
got to go.
cheated by
They
the
feel
system
cheated,
at each point. You know, they went to diesel because they were told that would save the planet. They go to electric, and now they're being hit with a tax, and that's not right.
Look, we're doing incredible things across our city around the move towards electric vehicles. You know, if you look at what we're doing in the transport system, got more than 2,600 zero-emission buses, the highest for any city in Europe. We've got more than 70% of our black cab taxi fleet, which is now zero emission. We've also got more than 26,000 electric vehicle charging points. I think London is leading the way globally.
Paul, is the appetite for the transition to net zero changing? Do people still want it sooner, or do you think people are now worried about higher bills?
Well, people are worried about higher bills, of course they are, but there is an appetite to get to net zero, but we have to do that in a sensible way. It doesn't make working people suffer at every moment, but it's difficult. Of course it's difficult.
In places like mine, Simon, to be completely honest, it's ULEZ killed a lot of that argument stone dead because they couldn't afford to go to work, they couldn't go to hospital visits, go to the shops. It has hurt a lot of people in Outer London, and that is why in Outer London in particular you are seeing this disconnect between City Hall that seem to be focused on Zone 1 rather than the practical challenges people have in Outer London where public transport is not the same.
And that's the way ULEZ was brought in, though. It was brought in a way that was absolutely deaf to the issues. Yeah. It should have been brought in a more graduated way. It should have hit people on purchase of new cars, not on their existing car. That was the problem.
There are thousands of young people across the city who have stunted lungs who will never be able to breathe the full capacity of their lungs. This is a big social and racial justice issue. We cannot.
Why do black people not pay for ULEZ?
We cannot.
Why is it a racial issue?
It is because people from black and global majority communities are more likely to suffer from the impacts of air quality because they live in areas of high levels of deprivation. We cannot normalise breathing dirty air. We brought it forward in a socially just way. We had a scrappage scheme of over £200 million. 54,000 Londoners were able to benefit from that scrappage scheme. Now, 97% of vehicles are compliant with our air quality standards.
Can I just ask you, Mete, before we finish, what did you bring back from Rio?
What did I bring back from Rio? Well, a number of things. Firstly, we worked together. Yeah, I mean, you know, they want to be funny about this thing, but you know, climate crisis is really important. I mean, we saw this year we had 4 extreme heat waves for long sustained periods, and what Londoners expect from us is seriousness when we're talking about this issue. What we brought back is meeting a number of businesses who want to invest in London and our climate innovations and our green spaces. What we met with other cities, learning best practice around what they're doing around planting street trees. And it's that sort of collective action that we need to work across cities.
OK, Mete, thanks for talking to us, and Louis and Paul. That's all we have time for tonight. Thank you to all my guests this evening. We're back next month for the final show of the year. Until then, goodbye and thank you for watching.